Au sa tamatada ia kau rongoda tu nanta mosa kadiviau domo munichisu au salako mai kemuni meu sambula kasavai ena vukumuni sanomuni nandra kalivi maina kau Kina nonguda meu sang gai vakambau au salako mai ki veke muni meu sambula kasavai ena vukumuni Sai ke muni chisu koni rawata mai moni sandau to takiau meu kuani rawai
Whalawhalai atu ko hingo hako ko poisi atu, mai he maanga ko la kepa niwe, na nofo he mutu nei ko Australia, ua fulo nei he tau, o mai na nofo i New Zealand o Kalana, to hoko mai ke mutu nei whakaue ki he mga nei ko whilewe ai ki he ata nei, ke tutalai puke whai whalawhala ki he tau manatu, hakua manako ki he moua he tau whakailoanga po ke mana manatu atu ki he hatau tōlua tupuanga mai he motu. Whawelahi. Growing up back home in UA, we don't usually think of these things until you grow up, and especially moving overseas, that's when I thought to myself, wow, this is something that we don't think about until you grow up and move overseas. Then we realize, so there's more than what we have back home. That's when I realized that, oh, I'm glad and I'm proud that I'm Niuean. I would say pretty much it's where you come from. It's from the home. It started, or it doesn't matter you live in New Zealand or Australia or America, it comes from home. It comes from your parents. To know that when you go out, when you step out that door, we can't follow you or listen to what you're saying. It has to come from home. You have to know that, at the end of the day, I will go back home to my parents. So knowing that where I grew up and to be the person who you are today is from what you're taught from home, and that's where you recognize your identity as well, because if we go and get into trouble, they will ask, what nationality are you? So that's the most important thing to remember, that if I get into trouble, my parents will get into trouble, my sisters will, the news will come up, oh, he's related to so and so, these kind of things that we don't realize until we get into trouble, and oh wow, at least I know where I come from, and sometimes, it's kind of like because I live overseas, they can't touch me, or they can't, but where I come from, you get the toughy, if your parents talk to you, they talk to you once. That's how they realize over here in Australia or everywhere in the world, you don't smack kids. That's how these little things started to, oh, I can do whatever. I go out that door. I can just go and, do something that you know that's not right, but you still go and do it because you know you get away with it. But we're back in the island. You do something bad, trust me, you're going to get a toughie when you get home. So, yeah. I think it's just growing up is like, oh, you're just innocent. You don't know like what's different of anything until now you realize. But it's only when you get upset with, oh, that's silly, and you say something, because that person is Samoan or Tongan, but not realizing, hey, we all the same. We do bad things as well. So it's not that pinpointing to, oh, he's Samoan, Tongan, Niuean. I don't put that as a different category now. Now it's just like everybody's the same to me. Yeah, if I go out and see, oh yeah, maybe he's Samoan, but I don't recognize him as a Samoan. He's just one of me. Yeah, that's how I don't recognize that then. Now it's just like everybody's the same. Yeah. Growing up, you're more down to earth, I think. You're more like appreciate what you don't have. Because now, if you go back to the island, you'll have a little fale somewhere still standing. But in here overseas, Australia, New Zealand, you just like class everything as like, if I want it, I get it. Whauelahi ko mai ka totolu ke moa whewhini, ko e hako ta manatu ne whakise ke mga whewhini, ko tupu mai anga he totolu ne o mai i niwe. Si whauelahi, hako mai ka totolu ke i loa, mo e mai ke whuia totolu ke o atu ke he lalolangi, whakise totolu a tau tāreni, mo e manamanatu, ke ha totolu a tau kaina he motu, pese ni kua lewa e nanofu kei kehe, ka e mailonga e tau tolu ta mamatua, me tau whakakoanga, he nanofu tau tolu ke motu si o mai e tau tolu ke motu nei. Whakawelai ki he tau whanau ni, kua mai ke whleweia mo e ko whē ni e mtakawi ka eke kukisia e mtolu e whakasino nei, po ke ata nei, ke manatutu mauha tau tolu a motu, po ke kaina, i niwe, ne o mai a tolu ki ai, mo e whau e ke he matohe lange, ka kai ana tau takitakianga munuina, a si moa e tolu e tau munuina he nonofu ke kehe e tolu ke he motu nei whakalawhalai atu.
I think it comes back to, because we are Samoan, we have that responsibility to, because, and it goes back to, when your parents go, what you do reflects back on us. And that's, I used to get that all the time. It was, why you do that? It's going to be a bad lung to us. So if you achieve, and I always say to our freshies, if you rise, we all rise, you know what I mean? And that's the thing, if we all fall, then, we can always help each other out. But I think from what I'm gathering from yourself is that, what you do as a Samoan, and what it reflects is that it's not the stereotype, but it's more if it benefits Samoa, then it benefits me. Or, if I do something right, then it also helps, or it also fails our culture. It's heaps of power. I think it's, because I want to say, yes, there's power and identity, but it's just more because you can identify yourself. When I say I'm Samoan, I feel that I'm Samoan, you know what I mean? And it's more the pride of being, like I'm Samoan, like when you say, I'm Samoan, I glow because the Mama Samoa are winning. If they lose, I'm losing. You know what I mean? And I feel that, just the Yeah, it's more the power of who you are, because I guess when regards to, if I'm winning, you're winning, and that, I just feel that it's not just you when you say I'm Samoan, it's everyone with you. You know, I know I always say my family, but like if I'm winning, then it benefits my wife, it benefits my kids. When I was growing up, you know, going to uni, it benefited my parents, because you know I was going to give them a better future, and you know now they've got what me and my siblings were able to give them. And it's just, with being Samoan, it just, people, when I say Samoan, people respect, I mean, no matter what culture you are, but I feel there's that certain respect for who you are, and that, yeah, and for me, it's more pride than power. Yeah. To be honest, when we were young, I mean, in the older generation, I think that was the thing where we didn't have that groundwork. For me, and my background in radio and with the youth, I think the great thing about, and I'm just talking about Brisbane, is that not, you know, universities are starting associations where each new poly that comes, they can feel, you know, they can join those uni groups. I know that there's a lot of associations now where, you know, Siva groups are actually making it more than just Siva. It's more learning Whakasā more, you know. And there's, you know, I can name, you know, 6 or 7. And the good thing about it is that it is starting from, you know, young kids, which is great. You know what I mean? I think one thing that I guess we need to do is more. It's great that we're concentrating on the young, and you know we're teaching the 5B, you know, not 5B. That's my radio. But that, you know, they're learning the alphabet. You know, they're starting the kindergarten, because there's 2 in north side, and then 2 in south side. But I think we need to start programs for our island, our teens, our older generation. I know that there's a couple of groups, but I think, yeah, we need to do more with the teens and the older, you know, the older generation, in regards to, you know, just getting more cultural practice, cultural programs, but not so much cultural programs, just more, and it, you know, when you're saying, you know, we lead towards gangs and we lean towards, you know, other things. The thing at the moment is, for me, I feel our youth are mimicking our Polynesians that are of influence. You know what I mean? And nothing wrong with the usos that are, you know, and I can only speak about the musicians. You know, with the music that they're providing. You know, everyone's saying, oh, because they listen to these usos, that they're doing a certain thing. And that's the thing. I think and it comes back to identity, because we see someone in the limelight, that's me, that's brown, we think, oh man, you know, if he could do it, I could do it. But I think, yeah, with our youth, we need to sort of guide them more better in regards to, yes, that is a uso, that is a brother, a Polynesian brother in the limelight, but, you know, we need to do this. There's the positive and the negative side of, you know, of that journey in regards to what they're doing. And I think, you know, it's just with the older, like with my generations, where the great thing now is we are slowly letting go of our guard, where, you know, we never spoke about our feelings, where the good thing about our generation now is we're slowly leaking in towards, you know, how are you, you know, the big thing about our Indonesians, and I know there's a lot that are, you know, that are taking the other, yeah, that are doing, you know, suicide. I didn't want to say that, but and it's more, I think, because they don't realize that there is help. Even though I know everyone says, oh, you know, I'm here for you, but I think it's just more, you know, being there. Instead of more words, we need to do more action. And that's the thing, we need to get more groups that are more proactive, instead of just, you know, posting up this and that. You know, get out into the community, go out into the schools, you know what I mean? That's where they are. Go to them, instead of, because I think at the moment, there's a lot of programs that say that they're for youth, but they're not going into the schools or they're not going into the unis. They just go, oh, here's a program that I'm going to give it to you. Come to me. Why don't you just go to them? And it's just, I think we need to go to them. That's just the thing. And that's, with I do, you know, because we're based on youth, you know, I hopefully, if I could touch one, you know, to, you know, like, and I say a lot on the show is, if I can't help you, then I know that there's other people that I can, you know, I can take you with. And that's the thing about Brisbane is that we have the connection, which is good. And that we can, you know, oh, you know, if I can't help you, then I know also, or I know a sister that can help you out. Which is growing and which is getting better. But as always, I mean, we can always get better with being more proactive.
Kia hau nei, ki tōku nei whakaro i te ao Māori, te tapa whā, te taha hiningaro, te taha wairua, te taha whānau, te taha tinana, ana te tapa whā o te tangata. Kia au nei, koina te tino nako o te me ki, identity, and ahakoa kōwai, ahakoa nohea. Kia hau nei, ko tāku nei taha Māori, e whā ngā kōkona ki au, te tuatahi ki te atua, te tuarua ki te whenua, te tuatoru ki ngā tupuna, te tuawhā ki ngā tangata e ora tunu ana. E rā mea he mea tino pai kia hau, e mau ana tēnā tikanga kia hau, e whāngai tērā tikanga kia kutamariki kia hikoi rātou tika, ka kore rātou e ngaro. Mena e mohe ana rātou, tō rātou maunga, tō rātou awa, waka, marae, iwi hapu rānei, heke iho ki tō rātou whakapapa, ara te identity ki au. I knew my identity from birth. My grandmother brought me up. My grandmother took me from my mother, as she gave, cut the cord, wrapped me up, put me in the car and took me up to where she lived. So my identity started from that first cut. She couldn't speak English. She could only speak Māori. She had her older brother with her and a younger sister. They all couldn't speak English. So my identity, I suppose, started with the reo that they spoke around me. I can't say where the beginnings are because, yeah, every day of my life is me, you know. I don't even know when I can say when did I first realise about my identity and stuff and who I was. It was embedded in me. While I was sleeping, my kuia would sing to me our whakapapa and our pepeha. When she married my grandfather, my kuia comes from one place, and that's Uruafuru and Welsford. My grandfather comes from many iwi down the line, Waikato, Maniapoto, Tuwhareto, Tiarawa, Tūhaurangi. And my grandmother fed me all that pepeha from all those tribes. So, yeah, where did it begin? From birth. I couldn't speak English until I was 9. I never went to school till I was 9. That's when my grandmother died. And I came back to my parents. And they put me in school. And at that time, I got caned on the first week for speaking Māori. I couldn't speak English. The whole week, every day, I got the strap. If I said the Māori word aloud, I get a cane. The second week was the same. In the end, my first Māori word was and I was proud because it was my first Pākehā word, you know. I didn't realise what it was. And then I come home and said it to my mother, why did you get the strap for? Because I said, and I got a hiding. My dad's a minister, eh? I got a hiding for swearing at home. So it didn't matter what I was doing. So I ended up being a rebel after a while, after my nan died. She was my world. It's the only world I knew. And the only world I was in was the Māori world. Then I come back to my parents who shoved me into this Pākehā world, crashed my whole world around. I think I became a drunken at the age of 12. That's how rebellious I became. When I lost my nan, I let everything go, chucked everything out the door, and I became this staunch, rebel 10-year-old girl. The cops coming over to talk to him. And the Pacific Island fellow looks at me, sees my face, he goes, oh, kia ora whai. He goes, yeah, what's up? What's happening with the bros? He goes, oh, whawhai's happened. These fellas came over, they were attacking this whānau here. I goes, okay, how do you know they were whānau? How do you know that they were whānau? He goes, oh, those two over there said those his cousins, his brothers, and blah, blah, blah. I go, so at the end of the day, what's your fellas call? Why are they handcuffed? He goes, oh, they didn't handcuff them in the end. I don't know what the take was, you know. And at the end of the day, it was a wasted space and time. Those fellas that they dealt to had gone, but this fellow was holding on to these kids, and they didn't know we were coming. They didn't know that their mother had rocked in. But the other three police were holding her two boys, yeah. And all we could hear was her yelling at them. And the 6 boys that were over here looked at me and goes, you sit there. No, I'm saying it nicely, eh? You sit there and don't move. We gave it to my bro, and he goes, what's up, yeah? They're going to take my boys and lock them up. I goes, well, what did they do? These kids already told us what they did. They ain't going to go away for a little bit, you reckons? No, they're going in for the night. Her boy was 15. I go, you know, isn't that illegal? Isn't that illegal? He's not even 16. And you're first taking him away. What's his crime? You know, all those, you go say, what did he do? What did he do? And the boy's going, I done nothing wrong. I done nothing wrong. I goes, oh, yeah. Okay, I can't get involved in this because I will. You know? I says to my mate, go with your boys to the police station. I'll take these fellas home. So we went and I took these fellas home and we dropped them off at the house and told their father what was happening. And at the end of the day, these 3 policemen gave the Pacific Island fella to talk to the Maori boys. And the Maori boys wouldn't talk to the Chinaman or the tūpākehā. And I don't blame them. The way they were talking to these two was really not, it made me angry. Just sitting there watching how they treated our people. They really did apparently the other fellas really got done over by those policemen because they weren't resisting arrest and all that kind of stuff, you know. So obviously you're going to get a dong. But these 6 fellas are just fresh out of New Zealand, come over for a holiday, and they were freaking out big time. And I just said to them, oi, this isn't our town. This is not our whenua. You can't do this here. Just remember, you know, this whenua don't belong to that Pākehā fella over there in the uniform, or that Samoan fella. Belongs to the tangata whenua here, the Aboriginal people of this place. You fellas go and hook up with them and find out how they roll. You'll understand how they're getting treated in their own country. We get that back home, but not as bad as these fellas. So, ko taku nei kōrero kia rātou, if this isn't our whenua, we got a home. You fellas just come from there. Those 2 boys they don't know they've never been home. No? And that's why they were the ones that instigated that whole thing. At the end of the day, these 2 started the fight with those fellas. But because those fellas were a gang, they got locked up. They got taken away. And at the end of the day, I said to these boys, don't you play that fellas game. Don't you fellas come here and do that. It's not, this is, our people are being shamed by you fellas doing that mahi. You know? I don't even want to know about the other group, but you fellas, I know you. I know your parents. You don't want to shame our people any more than you've done now. So yeah, it's all about them not knowing, and it started with these 2 who don't know who they are or where they come from. They just know your mother, father, brothers, sisters, and their bros. You know? Tika ana tō kōrero. Ko kore rātou he papa te noho ana, ko anaro. E mau ana rātou te ao Pākehā, koina te raruraru, te mea whawhai, te mea patu, te mea patu wāhine, e tahi o ngā Tani, ahakoa ko wai rātou, ngā wāhine, e whawhai ana ngā Tani ngi ngā wāhine. Tēnā te take kore rātou, e mōhio ana i o rātou ake ao me ki, i roto i tēnā ao te whakapapa. Hoki ana au i ngā wā katoa ki ngā whakapapa, ki ngā pepeha, rauatahi te tino nako o te ko wai ahau. Tell you what, I'll talk about those fellas that are in the room there. They started a march this year with no reo. They knew, the majority knew what their iwi and their hapu was, and that's it. So from there, not so much I gave them that information, I gave them areas where they can go and research those places. And if I knew what their marae was and it was close to me, I could tell them, yeah, you ring this marae and you ask them for your pepeha. And this is pretty much how once they got that information back, their whole mindset changed. Then I introduced a sentence structure to introduce their grandparents, their parents and them. And then that was in that second wave. The third wave was when they were able to add their husband, their children and their grandchildren. So it empowered them, just playing with pepeha and whakapapa. It gave them a more sense of who they were here. And as it is, the majority of them have their mahi hanging on the wall, so their children and their grandchildren can see it and ask, so they share. So it's empowering not just them being in the class, but their whole family. And now they're playing with all those, they're creating songs. This fella just sung one of the songs that his moko wrote, just reading off their pepeha, off the wall. And moko put it to a tune, one of the nursery rhymes tunes. He comes in and sings it today. You know, che kolo, go on kolo. Yeah, and that's my rebel. She's half Australian. And she's always, don't know how to do her Māori vowels. But he's been teaching her to sing a e haka mana para tawa ngā whae. And you can tell the Australian twang when they use, yeah, it scratches my ear, but it's changed. It's changed. You know, his whole whakaaro has changed. He's been here for over 30 years, the old fella that did the mihi. He's been over here for over 25 years. Been home a couple of times. Every time he goes home, you know, dish out the money. You know, in Australia, you got all this money, you can do this, that, and that. When he goes home, he's sitting on the taumata, but he won't say anything. He's sitting there and he doesn't know what's going on. He goes, that's why he came. He goes, I want to go home. I want to sit on my taumata and I want to stand and speak. I goes, go for it. Go for it. All I can do is give you an idea or a structure. It's up to you how you bring it off the page. You talk with your mouth, your eyes, your ears, your hands, your everything. Talk with your body. Chuck something in your hand. If you're talking about the atua, then point to him. If you're talking about the whenua, then point to the whenua. You're talking about these areas, you use your whole body so the fella listening can understand what you're saying.
I think it is very important to have that connection to our to where we come from, to our values, to the cultures that we have been brought up with. Like for me, I lived in Fiji for more than 30 years before I came to Australia. And if I don't teach my children things about where my father is from, where my mother is from, where my land is, and who owns the piece of land that we collectively own as a Matangali, who owns it with me, and how am I related to those who own that land with me. I have to make sure that my children know this, because otherwise they will be disconnected from that, and they will have nothing else to fall back to, or when they go back to Fiji, they wouldn't even know where they are from and who their relatives are, where their land is, and they will be totally lost. And the cultures that we were brought up with, me as a young child growing up in my village, and the respect that I have for my elders, and how that I've been taught to address them. These are some of the things too that I have to let my children know, so that they do the same. So when they go back to Fiji, they don't feel out of place. They know what to do, how to react in certain circumstances, how to address people who are older than them, how to react when they are around their cousins, their brothers. These are the things that make all of us identify us to our cultures, to where we come from. And it is very important that we share this around with our children and with those who we come in contact with, so that we never lose sight of the background that we were brought up from and the connection that we have to our origin. I will say that being a lawyer does not isolate myself from a connection, or does not mean that I have to disconnect myself to my roots. And if anything, it helps me understand more the importance of maintaining that connection, even though that I'm happy that I'm educated, and some people, when they are educated, they want to disconnect themselves from the outside world, especially their origins, and they want to maintain the life they now have as a success without attaching it back. But for me, I will always say that whatever I achieve, it goes back to the roots, to where I've started this journey, to where I was born, to the school that I was taught for 8 years in the primary school. The 2 hours walk every morning and walking back every afternoon after school, that is something that probably that molded me into the person I am. So my connection to my roots is it's very important to know, to learn that those things have molded me into the person I am now, and which probably has something to do with why I completed my studies, why I'm working now as a lawyer here in Australia. Yeah, it goes back to that. And if I'm going to be asked, how did you achieve this success? I achieved it because of the values driven into me in those younger ages, and I still maintain those up to this time.
Well, nei taimi e whaafitai lava o mau nei awa noa e whelo e ma nei fo i whaatantanoanga nei afi. Ia o lo ingoa o whiatau pou sina le mosu. O au te whanau mai i le nuu lea o mta utu le whanga. O le nuu lea sa whai ei le film lea ale o le Return to Paradise. It's called Return to Paradise. O le nuu lea, o le mata ngofio lea nuu, sa au wola e mo whanau wai lea nuu. O nuu foi lea, e o mai umai a teine au le lei. Au wafoi, e mata ngofie. Ma o le ata foi lea sa pu e ai, ia o le teine, e o mai umai a teine au le lei i le nuu lea. Ma sa au wola e foi le nuu lea, sa au wola i le tina o lo tina. O Sapini, Maasani, Naseri, tali au. O ia lea sa ia o au ina lava au, mai le taimi au ulai titi. Sa au tupu ai le nei lava nuu o se nuu e ese lo fia na o wola e ai. Ma se grandma fo e ese le alofa ia te au. E tele taimi sa tu ua ai o au lava o le grandchild mua lava i tutonu o le matou a inga. Sa tele la mea sa o iloa ina ma o tupu ai tono nei lava nuu. Ai le ngata le sa o wa ai fo i ma o iloa le alofa lo grandma ia te au. Il tau singa o au, ma le faa onga, ma mea lei uma sa ia whaia mo au. Ma sa o la e fo i o se ainga e sili o na maulalo. O le upu maulalo e mativa, e le maua se mea, e tele fo ina le maua se tangata e mawhai o na maua mai ai se mea ai. Ai sa matou sa o la e se teine fia. Sa o i loa lava le file mua le nā taimi, sa o le loa ni mea se po se mea sao. Na o i loa lava e au ia o se mea whaingo fie le tupu ai o se teine tala vau le nuu. Wa e pei lava o se ainga le tono le nuu lea. Sa o le loa foi se mea e sili atu o na usuista i le tina matua. Ina ua tupu e pea sa alu pe ia onga, ma wha solo lava ina teine matua. Ia ma o ai fo i nisi o tu langa e tu ua ai le ainga, ma sa ova ai fo i ia tina matua. Lea lofa lava ia te mātou. O lo tina matua le sa ia o ina ia te au i lea lofa i tangata, ma ia I loa o na lalanga mea tau e atina ele a inga. E mātou te o e tau e au mai mea whai eile mea ai, o popo, e whaile ma umanga, e whai eia, e o e au mai ia whaatoanga, ia ma tā mai lau whaongo e whai ei whala, ia ma stele lava o onga le sa o o inai, I lo nei tina, lo nei di tene a o lai titi mai a tina matua. Ia, e au na whaali atu I tangata, ia oe lava I o oe o se tene Samoa. O oe o se tene na e ola mai o oe lava o le Samoa e te iloa tu langa whaaloalo, e te iloa tu le tu ma le anga wha Samoa, e te iloa le tautala, e te iloa le winga o le alofa atu I tangata mātutua. Na fula mai awha e te alofa I o mātua, ma tausi o mātua. E wha aleva ina lo wola I lunga le nei o langa. Ma o fia I lava uia o te tau lava uia o se tene Samoa moni. E mawhai ona o iloa le alofa ma le wha aloalo I o uso a tangata. Sa o iloa fu ile ese o le vai teime e te olai o se Samoa. Ma o te fia fu o te ola mai o se tamaita I Samoa. Io o matua te le lava le senga le vai taimi le nei I le taimi na matua wola mai ai sa matua le sa o wola mai sa o le loa se senga o le va sa o loa na tausi le va o le tuangane ma le tuafini sa o loa fa alo le va o matua o matua maisi matua I le taimi la le nei o matua te le lava le senga wa le loa na fetausia I le whaaloalo, wa le ilona whetausia I tamine wola mai ya nei tupulanga, wa lato le iloa le whaaloalo, wa lato le tautala ni upulelei, wa lato le iloa ni mātua, wa tupulawa tamaititi le mea e iloa, pa e whaanono ai awa e te tau o na lato iloa le upu, ia e awa ilo tamama lo tina. Ma ia e loa na whaaloalo I tupulanga wa e ona e ai.
Naka nusa ambula nakwa. Nedangu skeli ngonondovu dorovo mana koro enganake wakai vola ia tiki no suba na sana rewa. O vasu na koro elevu tunloa mana sana vakaturanga vakondrobe. Ena wono vola kaumbula kina ada nugu matangali na tonre. Ena lo mani kena bubale na toko ngumu nugu tutu boka bonua e ona kauni mbati mbalau. Kitu lewe tini kandua na veite vini. Lewe ono na elewa kitu lewe lima na tangani. Miona boka madal tangana nugu veka boka bonua. Na nungu kauna bono na nungu ika na nguru. Na nungu monu na bonre. Na nungu vava na ngari. Na nungu kutu na ura. Na nungu lisi na sidi. Nungu umbini roa bona vai. Na umbini lowe Numbini lobo na vai na nungu vesa na rewai. Palagala kaya seranga na veka membalitiau. Naksak. Na vale muna taro. Na numni taro na kini sau ke baka muna palagala taka. Ngori ndona kaya wakai sulu te ki mami kina na kalo. Sai koya na ni mami tobo kina ni mami bala. Ndona kaya mi ki mami dua tani mai kina berabe kauta mata taleso. Vese ibiti waka kena vese burubura utukuna tikuna vese eviti mbala tribango eviti endu ni abusa turanga endu na kaira kleita nikina endora ka ke bang bimbita ki se koya na ni mami bosa na numu bosi ni bonua endu tani mai na no bosi ni bunu endu na tamata ngoe baka raita tu ni ko kaw ni tamata ni bunu baturango so dabu tu meno bunongo koya endora ka ndu bimbi kina na numu klei ko tubo katikiko mbata na ngono mo tumbu da kiting mekina o sakla tu ngo na numu kanakana ngo na numu bonua ngo na bunu rambole mati kini ra numu ngase ngo na bunu rambule kino iko batikir na numu kawa ngo na bunu sema meki na numu do kani batikir tu na bunu bo turango ni ngo la ko tindor bonua o sa sana la ko tu bo bulangi e una ngono ki tumbu de mekina arto ba buli de usar me bali bo na numu ngase na numu beka ba bonua o kalonga tsara bali ni ro buli de mo na tukangu ni ungai tigu mai ungai tigu kila mo sa tigu tumbir tu mai na nungu vika ba no sina vika u kili tenikina tigu saranga mai na nungu dabuti miliado na nungu ngai klasi ba sa tigu ba tambor na ngona tundu klabi na kartu mi vale au ngai klasi walo so tumbera kamunanga daga na ngani bonua daga na ngani tu matagali au san tu baro mungara mbola ta ba ni u kili eu tu ba minaka ena nungu daga wa daga tu ba kandoni bolo tukutuko na nonto bonua na sivia ni tiri karu na mbaki lima na mbaki mai na lomani lima na mbaki au daga tu na kamba ni sipa for times ando nungu daga tu ngole wa buitu le viti muna le siko banua le turu mani tukutuku nonda banua na tukutuku ni tau banua ya na nungu ngido ngole tu ya na ngono ngi waru ngole kintur muno sakla na matani katu bo sakla tatu na matani katu bono duruma nimber no duruma na bono ambala tini sakla tu na nungu vika ba muno kina nungu bekani o ka andora ka ando bimbitu kenta trana itu ke andora ka bimbikin ando bimbita ko kana nanda ngandri menta kila na nanda bosa na nonda bosa e pagari teki kenta ni ona vital no batiki indu e kliko batiki kwa ni na vital no nango na ngamatenga ni atu bosa na tumutum kwa sana renu torro sana se ve na bono e da butumi ki no ni lora yendo na bagandindi ke na nonda ma bosa ni bonu na kai toke sibe ni tulan robada na bosa ni bonu ani toke more than 300 dialects mbi wata me gento na kena matova sa na alphabets na bosa balangi ruso bukono na matova sa na alphabets na bosa baka viti tur subu ketul endora kaya baka ita tu ya wa na kena butu ni au tu na nonta vika baka itu ki sera vika enda kleiten kin na kena itu ki endora ka ko mo sumu kin militar ro endora ka bimbi kin menta klana nonta na menta klana menta kleiken ta baka tikenta baleta ena baka ndi tiki kutu ko na ngole tu na senga ni ngole mo ngalu si mo ngole tu mo mandua ona klana ka mo dakaba ona klana mata ki bosa ta mo tauda ena ngono da kena ngono dondo ngono ngonda reda ele busa la tu na voz tu va na vi wali sa torri baka dala tu na vi kani ko vi kani na vi to buta ke vi tambani sa dala tu na ke ba banda matra da ni sa dala tu na ke ba tibu sa dala tu na ke ba banda ange non ta tu ngono tumi bosa kina tumi tobo pinak o klana ndui bata o bana ndui tamata andua na non rendui dingi o marautaka si onto kata kana nomu ngoni mai bonongo sisiang ke baka ena dui wata na non dui dingi ena sompe na soko lotu era sa baka tambuya na sona ka baka banua kason duli babu na kena le davitu sona vika anta kliterikina sona itobo sona bala dinasar na kani barita tu gore so sara bimbi mai balangi era bimbi mai banua sara ngol mai balangi era sangule da na vika era tumbir mikina veiau baka teke untuk ka untuk pambimbi ta tu veiau wa na mbula ni reilesu na non da tiku niku ambala tondora kaya dona singana no our being here today is because of something that happened yesterday klangor into na tu rong binanji na veiau mantanga na nuku da tu sambo vida na matin tu na ve se buru sambo Italia pa mai le su sara mai na boli ku ni buru Europe le su mai na tokela loma anda vida Europe le na Pasifika gendora ka undu maruta kan undu sota ba undu ngoni bichi megi pa mbula mai vio megi bosa mai vio na no bosa undura ka undu maruta dona casa lo ritungo bichi mai na tolan robada na bosa ni banua e ruasa bulu sa kaumboko endua sa kaumboko ndira ngana kenta mata tamu sakani kene karua sa ambulu turun tamata ya sama tina nono bosa sa nono daga ko na tumi bosa belter da pon ni rasa ngai bale rasa sang di bosa taka chu kana nono bosa so ena lesunga mai bale oyo marutaka si ko talitaka ni ko dabutu mena korongo ena ya busongo na lomo ni matangali ngo na toko ngo na no mitutu ko bonongo o marutaka tiku ni ngo na no mu ngo na vika ba surumi ko kina na kalau sesiang ke boy ko tuku no eu na ngoni mai ka iya ya lo vinaka bokan de tekiko kila na no mi abusa ada no mi abusa kila na no matangali no mitutu ko bonongo na nomu bosa na nomu itabi kina bonua pata kina bobali na nomu vewe kani mai na bonua kina bobali ka kede ko ka bimbi ya ke ba ka sabe ka etiko ni ko dabutu mina koro obambo tra lusunga weekend adu pinaka
Maloa pito ko hoku hingoa, ko aloisia paongo. Ko hau mei vavau, mei tonga. Pea ko kuongo mātua, ko isileli pea moheta. Mo e whanau e tō fitu. Ko au kulahi taha e tamai ki whewhine. Ko e whehu i lelei eni, i e te kei puke puke ho tō urunganga whakawhonua, moe lotu. Kia te au, ko lotu i he kutupu hake i tonga, ko ia na e hoko o tu mo unga ia i he loto o e tonga kotoa. Ko e lotu. Ko e sāpate kotoa, kai ke awa whare koloa, kai ke awa mea keke, ko e tāpune mea kotoa, ka te alu ke lotu. Ko e lotu, mo tō ngahi unganga whakawhonua, e hanga he e lotu o ngāhi o tō urunganga whakawhonua ke tō lelei ange. O i kai i he whaunga hala, ka koe whaunga whakaotua. He koe tau nofo i he māmani, ka kai ke kawe o tua, i he tau ngahi nofo whakawhamili, i he tau ngahi nofo whaka-community, mo tau ngahi nofo whakawhonua, hei kai ke lelei ha mea ia. Alu whakataha ai lotu, mo tau unganga whakawhonua, pa lelei e mea kotoa toape, o tupurake. O tupunga pe ia, mihi anga nau tupu hake i api. O ko tupu hake i aongo mātu a lelei, na anea nana kola na ki i au, ke mana tu i mau pe ko e tonga au. Ko tonga o ku ofa, ko tonga o tō koni, ko tonga o ku vahe vahe. Ko ha mea ku mau. Ka kui kai ko tonga, ke te whoaki kotoa mea kotoa ku te mau pa te nofo ki tā lata. Vahe vahe pe mea ku ke mau mo ki nau tolu o ku nau fie mau.
There's two sides to the coin. So in one way, colonization has changed our cultures. So they've taken things away. They've like oppressed, certain things, rituals, culture, protocols. Like for example, in Tahiti, I know the language was banned. Also, our traditions like singing and dancing, that was also banned. And then now it's been revived and it's going sort of through a renaissance. So some people can think of us, the colonizers, as oppressive, taking over, changing. And I'm not saying that I'm grateful, but the main thing is, like, look at this interview, we're doing it in English. You know what I'm saying? So there are two sides to every story. So I don't want to sort of go into politics of it, because some people are pro one way and some people are pro the other way. For me, being colonized, like, I wish I did learn more about my own culture and also spoke my own languages. So that would be Maori and Tahitian, so that's just an excuse. Of course I can learn them now, but with colonization, it's not the first choice. So here in New Zealand, everybody speaks English. The language that we conversate in is English, because Maori was, forbidden, it was banned. So now generation, it's good that the ones who are learning Maori is really good, because they do have that knowledge of their own language, the reo. And same in Tahiti. But I know that Tahiti, it's under the French colonization. Only a few people speak Tahitian, like mainly the older generation, and only a small percentage of the young generation speak it. So in a couple of generations, we may not have our language. So as colonization, like, I don't think it's a really good thing, but hey, what can you do? There's always going to be a more dominant culture in the world that we live in. For those who are in power, I don't think they realize the effects. Like, for example, some people may call it white privilege. People who live like that, who have been raised like that, may not realize the advantages that they do have in being raised like that. So being Maori, you know, and when I was back in New Zealand for a few years, what I noticed and what I learnt about is that it's having Maori people make decisions for Maori people in the way, not have us being not dictated to, but not saying, okay, you should do this. This is how you should spend your money. This is how you should use this land. This is how you need to act. This is how, you know, it's mainly taking the empowerment to our own people and voicing how we think things should be. Whether that's, okay, we can speak our language, we can dress like this, we can wear our tāmoko, we can do our cultural things because it's important to us as those people. So in terms of, there's always going to be clashes with cultures, you know, has come at the price of like colonization, also globalization, you know, and a lot of people, I'm not saying I'm an expert on this, but this is just my own sort of thoughts. It's mainly being able to make our own decisions about how we do things, how we manage our resources, how we choose to be seen, how we want our culture to be shown. You know, those decisions should ultimately rest within us. So living here, like most Polynesians here are mixed, you know, and being brought up in Australia, at the end of the day, not that we're Australians, but we, like my children I look at, for example, they're Aussies. Even though their DNA may be Polynesian and they go to school with Australian children, and it's just, not that it's a bad thing, but then it's mainly, we grow up with sort of one mindset, that's because that's all we see. You know, if we lived in a place where there was lots of Polynesians and they were at a Seaver every weekend and, you know, spoke our languages, and it would be a different story. But since we're living here in Australia, you know, it's the Western story. Not that that's a bad thing, but that's just what it is, you know. I think a lot of it it's here in Australia, you don't get that much exposure to it, only unless your family has those connections. For example, say if you're a Samoan and you're living in an area where there's no Samoans around, your parents don't speak the language to you, your parents don't go to like a church or have any affiliations with other Samoans, then you'll pretty much have an Australian experience. But if you are raised in, like, for example, I'll just use an example, a pastor's family, Samoan, and then they go to the Samoan church, and then they only speak in Samoan there, they learn the hymns, they learn the language, and then they're a part of the Samoan culture here in Australia, their experience will be totally different to one that doesn't have that experience. So living in overseas, not everybody has the opportunity to go back to the islands for whatever reasons, financial or distance or whatever it may be. So if you do have the chance to go back to your homelands, you know, I would say treasure it, because then you get to see how they live in the islands, you know. Now, like, for example, when we go back to Tahiti, we meet all of our family, we learn all the names, they're speaking in French, some of them speak in Tahitian, the aunties speak, you know, and you're just immersed in it. And then you have this, and being immersed in the culture, you actually learn so many things. You learn, oh wow, they speak French in this country, you know, oh wow, they speak Tahitian, oh they do things like that, oh they do this, oh when you greet each other we all kiss each other on, you know, it's just, but these are things that you would never learn if you're not exposed to them. So that's the main reason, is it's being exposed to it. You know, however big or small, if you have that opportunity to be exposed to the culture, whether good or bad, because there's bad too, you know, but whether it's good or bad, at least you're exposed to it. And then whatever you decide to do, if you choose to pursue the language, that's cool. If you choose to pursue the dance, or, you know, that's cool as well. So yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts. If you have the opportunity to be exposed to it, I think that will give you a deeper sense of appreciation of the culture. Then you'll realize, wow, I'm missing out on this, you know? I've seen one on Facebook. It's like the analogy of these two brothers. Father was an alcoholic, and then the two brothers, okay, one went the negative way and one went the other way. And they're like, why? It's because the father was an alcoholic. So it's really what you do with your situation. You can either choose to follow the negative, or you can choose to go away from the negative, you know, and choose the positive. So a lot of that I think comes down to, you know, your surroundings, who you surround yourself with. Are you surrounded, some people come from families that may not be a positive influence, and that's hard, you know, especially if you come from families, the ones that are supposed to like love and care for you, and it's, you know, then there's violence and all these other negative issues. It is really hard to overcome that. So if you're able to surround yourself with positive people, find yourself your tribe, or, you know, like the gang thing, it can be good. Not a gang, but I'm like, find yourself a positive gang. You know, not one that does negative things, drugs, alcohol. Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to be rambling, but you know, it's about finding your positive tribe, really. And you know, I know some reasons people go into gangs and have negative, it's because they're trying to find their family. They're trying to find somewhere where they belong, you know, and whether it's with these bunch of people, they may be negative, but oh well, they still love me. But they get me to do all these silly things. Oh well, they still love me, they got my back. But you need to really find out what's good for me, you know, what's positive for me. And then as you find out what you want, a positive experience, then you will attract others who share the same thing. And then you'll be able to have that positive experience, you know, so yeah. Yeah, well the thing is, it's like, at least you'll know, and then it's up to you to choose what you do with that knowledge, you know. At the end of the day, there's like lots of books around the world, and you can either choose to focus on the negative ones or read the rubbish books, or you can read the good ones that promote positivity. So really, at the end of the day, it's up to you. It's your choice, you know. But if you can have a good head start and have good family around you and a good bunch of friends and community around you, then your experience is going to be a more positive experience, you know. Then if you choose to go off that, well, you know, that's up to you. You know, some things are, like I love that story that you shared. It's true. At the end of the day, it's up to the person. And you know, what I find with our people sometimes is we tend to bring others down. You know, we tend to judge them because of the choices that they might make that we don't agree with. So for being members of the church, they may look at that and say, oh, he's getting a tattoo. We don't believe in tattoos. Or, oh, that one's dancing and they're wearing inappropriate costuming. Oh, we don't believe in that. At the end of the day, we need to celebrate the positive things and not judge, really, because the judging is real, and the gossiping, that's what kills everybody. It's because our communities are so tight-knit, you know, and then this family might not want to come because of what this family thinks about this family. I'm like, all that needs to stop, really. All the drama needs to stop, and sometimes it happens within the families, you know. So my thing is with, at the end of the day, it is about respect. You know, you can listen to their opinion, but then you can also make your own decisions. So it is listening to your elders, because we live in a totally different generation now. Like I look at my children, they don't listen to necessarily everything I say, but of course we want the best for our children. So our families just want the best, but if we're able to communicate that to them, you know, that may help. The reasons why. Okay, Mum, I want to do this because, and then I know that you may not agree with it, but this is my choice. If you can please just be happy for me, because I think that's where most of the problems come from. It's not any outwardly big, huge thing. It's just differences within the family, and then they sort of filter out into the community, which filter out into, you know, in the larger society. So for us, it's just, you know who you are, be respectful, be kind, be humble. But at the end of the day, we need to make our own choices. You know, it is our choice to choose whether you want to do this or whether you want to do that. Yeah. And be happy with the consequence.
Ma lo lava le soifua I lange ma. O lo ingo le whawa li I tia o ne nare. O te saung mai le ngu o le pā, vaiala, malai la, ngofo a li, ma sa funge I ne motu a sala a whai. Tā alofa, tā alofa, tā alofa lava. Yeah, our cultural identity is extremely important for us as Pacifica, because It's a royal lineage. It's what connects us to our motherland. It's what connects us to all of the amazing cultural treasures and all of the amazing knowledge that we're inherited to, that was gifted to us. Maintaining and nurturing our cultural identity abroad is extremely important for, if we don't know where we come from, we really won't know where we'll be going. In terms of our cultural identity, these are gifts, these are tools in helping us move forward wherever we go in life. It helps anchor us within the world. It helps anchor us in knowing our kofi and knowing our position within the world. And failing to know your cultural identity would result in a lot of people falling into internalizing negative stereotypes about us that mainstream society already have. By having your cultural identity, you clearly understand your competitive advantage and what your culture has that Western society does not provide. Interesting, in terms of our youth, when I look at Pasifika success, much of the research and much of my personal experience within communities shows that many of the successful Pasifika youth are generally the ones who are well grounded within their culture. So they understand clearly where they come from, and they understand clearly the power of the knowledge systems of our cultural inheritance, and they're able to use that to navigate whatever system they're in. An example, there's many Samoan professionals who use the skills of Samoan oratory in how they present professionally and how they work in the professional field. So it's just extremely important. I cannot emphasize enough just how powerful harnessing our cultural identity and our cultural knowledge in the Western system is. It's our competitive advantage. One of the quotes that I draw much inspiration from is from His Royal Highness Tuia Tua Tupua Tamasese Efi, which reads, "I am not an individual, I'm an integral part of the cosmos." In terms of identity, I just believe for us as Samoan and for us as Pasifika, our identity is within the collective. So and it's relationships. So it's our relationship to each other as family. It's our relationship to the land as Mother Earth, and it's our relationship to the langi as heaven. And just having everything in harmony, I genuinely believe that's where our identity stems from. For us as Pasifika, it's really important for us to see ourselves within the pipeline. So it's very empowering for Pasifika to see their own knowledge systems in, because it's who we are. We're not white, we're not Balang. So when their Pacific, their Samoan way of learning and engaging is nurtured, it's extremely powerful. So examples, us as Pasifika, we always learn collectively. We learn in doing, we learn through praxis, we learn in participating in events. It's through participating in events such as fa'alavelave, funerals, that we gain knowledge. Our culture is a living culture. It's not a dead culture just relegated to the textbook. It's a constant living and breathing culture that we learn through engaging in. So I fight for, and I believe it's extremely important that Pasifika people must be reflected in the curriculum in order to empower them, because it's who we are. So and this fight that I had, it's completely useless to have languages like Japanese and German taught in schools like Woodridge with high Pasifika populations. Our Pasifika languages and indigenous languages should be at the forefront of schools with high Pasifika and indigenous. The power of colonialism within the education system and trying to whitewash us is very real. So us as Pasifika have a responsibility and a duty to ensure that we disrupt that, we shake that, and we erase the colonial stink and the colonial stigma within the education system, such as ensuring that we see ourselves reflected in a lot of the materials we learn. So there's a lot of great work by a lot of Pasifika teachers that are starting to get rid of books like To Kill a Mockingbird and Eurocentric books, and instead implementing Pasifika books that are more applicable and are more relevant to Pasifika student lives. So I really advocate for learning of Pasifika languages and just Pasifika ways of learning in a Western school system. It's extremely important. And not only is it important for our own Pasifika people, but I believe non-Pasifika Australians would also benefit from seeing our non-Pasifika people will also benefit from seeing the competitive advantages of our cultural practices. Yeah, you know, those Pasifika who have Samoan and Tongan ancestry or Tongan and Māori ancestry are extremely blessed that they're entitled to all that ancestral gift and all that ancestral knowledge, and it's absolutely important if you can trace, if you're a person who has both Samoan and Tongan ancestry, to draw upon both knowledge systems because they're both extremely powerful. You have more tools to navigate the Western society. I believe a lot of the Pasifika youth, it's very important for them to start learning the language. I believe that the only way to see the Pasifika lens is to speak the Pasifika language more. So there's many insights that you will gain as a Samoan if you speak the tongue of the Samoan language. I totally believe it's through reclaiming our language. That's a political form of resistance against the colonial stink that we've been put in. I also believe having a personal connection back to our whenua. So I'm a big believer in the transformative power of, if you're Samoan, going back to the land. If Samoa was our motherland, which she is, then we as her children have a responsibility to go and know her and protect and defend her. So us in the diaspora, as diaspora Samoans and diaspora Tongans, have a duty and responsibility to go back to the islands and have a personal connection. I believe through there, you'll come out far more empowered to navigate the Australian context and the rest of the world. Oh, colonialism is alive and well. The fact that there are still non-Pacific people commentating on Pacific affairs goes to show just how entrenched colonialism is. It's a total constant fight. Until we have 100% language, until we have 100% of Samoans speaking Samoan, 100% Tongans speaking Tongan, and until the negative stereotypes are fully erased, colonialism is still alive and well within our lives and within society today. So the work will forever be ongoing, and it will be ongoing far beyond our lifetime. Colonialism is far from dead for us. Like I said, the fact that, you know, large Pasifika schools are still being taught Japanese and German instead of indigenous dialects and Samoan and Tongan just shows the extent of colonialism today. So yeah, no, colonialism is really, really bad because we still have a lot of non-Pasifika people trying to override and speak over our narrative. So there's a lot of Pasifika events that happen, but in Western society, a lot of them are not validated unless a white anthropologist comes and commentates on that. So we really need to change that narrative around and really start taking ownership and controlling our story. Once we control our narrative and our story and control and implement our knowledge systems amongst our people, may the decolonizing process really truly start in earnest. All the battles of decolonizing and claiming our space, you know, acts of correcting people that mispronounce our names, our ancestral names that have long legacies, and Matai names that are extremely important, correcting non-Pasifika on how to pronounce them correctly. Those are small steps. Having Pasifika, Samoan and Tongan people such as rugby players and music artists and actors start to speak our languages within a mainstream setting and normalizing our languages in a predominantly Western space. A lot of these decolonial initiatives are extremely important because it shows not only can Pacifica be successful, but Pacifica can be successful in a Western setting as Pacifica. We don't need to turn around and be fake and be someone we're not. We're able to use our Samoan and our Tongan culture within a Pālangi setting. So yeah, it's a constant process that will take a really long time, but is well worth it. Pacifica people today are in an extremely important position. It's through our parents' sacrifices from the islands that we are here today. Because we are here, we've been privileged the honor of coming to Australia via our parents' blood, sweat and tears. We have a responsibility and a duty to do well here in Australia, not only for the sacrifices of our parents, but for the other Pacifica youth that are coming up. I believe we have an obligation and a duty, having been privileged to come here and having navigated here. I believe we owe it to our younger siblings generation and our kids generation to give them a better, more Pacifica-fied Australia than the one that we inherited today.
Identity to me has a lot to do, first and foremost, with where I come from, yeah, and who I come from. Not so much who I am now, but you know, when you take into account all those things, the places that my ancestors come from, and the places I've been, mostly the places that I connect to myself. Those things have had a profound influence on who I've become. The people I come from have had an influence on how I think, how I act, how I speak, what I decide to do in my life. And so when it's asked, what do I think about identity? What is identity? Who am I? I have to ask those questions first. Where do I come from? Who do I come from? Yes, I have seen a change in my own life. I am, I guess you could say, multi-ethnic, multiracial. My father is Tongan, and my mom is Hawaiian Filipino, actually. And so growing up in a multicultural home, on any given day, probably on a Sunday, we could be preparing Filipino food, listening to Hawaiian music after going to a Tongan church program. So that's always been a part of who I am. And I think the problem that we have today is sometimes we feel we got to compartmentalize that. A lot of times outside forces in influencing, how we think, says that I got to choose one. Are you Tongan? Are you Hawaiian? What are you? Choose one. And I can't, because they're all a part of who I am. But I think at the same time, how you choose to identify yourself, it still does have a lot to do with where you are, what you're doing, what is it that you desire? What is it that, what goals, or, where are you trying to get to? But for me, those who have had problems with identifying or navigating, who am I? That's a big part, is they should learn first, who they come from, where they come from. As a Pacific Islander, there's this deep connection that's really difficult for a lot of people to articulate. So when, I can live thousands of miles across the ocean in Utah, for instance, but there's always something that pulls me back here. There's always a special place I keep in my heart for Hawaii or for Tonga. I have a good friend. She grew up in a military type of family. And even though she's never stepped a day in her life in Tonga, she can tell you stories about the place her family's from. She can tell you stories of her family in that village. There's a special connection we have because these places are not just seen as places to live in, but they influence everything. Our ancestors are buried there, they're born there, and our lives are intimately connected with what goes on in the land, in the village, in the country. So I think, what people in the diaspora and outside of Polynesia, one suggestion from me, not telling you what to do, but one suggestion would be to do that, is to really take a look at those questions. Where do you come from and who you come from? You can also still define yourself how you wish to define yourself. But I think a more complete picture of who you are will be answered by those two questions as well. Yes, colonization has definitely impacted how we see ourselves, especially in today's world. Race has become really a big topic of discussion, and a lot of the ways we see ourselves as Polynesians, as Pacific Islanders, has a lot to do with the influence from the outside world. Sometimes we've had, from growing up in the islands, there's a stigma within ourselves about how we look, our skin color, our hair, what we wear, whether we go to church or not. And don't get me wrong, we've gained so much good things from the outside world, but we should not deny as well that there have been negative influences. I believe there's still colonization happening today, but it's not as overt, I would say, as it was before, especially in certain places. Some places back in the past were, colonized pretty heavily, and it was made known, what the policies were and what the outsiders were trying to change and influence. And in other places, the natives were able to combat it better and to stay clear of full, complete dominance from the outside. But today, I think there's still attempts by certain forces, certain peoples, in many different countries, sometimes to stamp out our identities, our unique identities, calling for a colorblind world. Unfortunately, I don't think that's a smart thing to do, to have a colorblind world. We ignore the uniqueness, the differences, the complexities that our peoples have. And when you say things like that, colorblind, you ignore the living experiences that people have that are different from others. To judge according to race, according to color, now that's something we could live without. But to say that we need to think the same, look the same, act the same, speak the same, do all those things, you start to lose the beauties that is unique amongst our different groups. So I would say yes, there's still a lot of colonization going on, but I think I would also argue back, sorry, kind of a long answer, but I would argue back, there's a lot of effort to push back and to strengthen who we are, yeah? And to take a step back and to look at our roots and how that can help keep us strong in our identities. I would say that I wouldn't say that anything that would take away from the success and from the happiness and joy and accomplishments people have today that don't have a connection to, say, their Polynesian or Pacific Island roots. There are many people out there who may not speak the language, who may not dress the dress, who might not even know, let's say, something as simple as where their parents are from, a specific village. And I wouldn't want to say that they haven't been successful or they have found some sort of happiness. What I would say and what I would suggest is that being who we are, coming from where we come from a place where relationships and connections is so core and so vital, not only in the past for survival, but also for our people's ability to withstand changes in our environment, our people's ability to be interdependent and to help and to grow together. So what I would say is, what I would suggest is that knowing who you are, knowing where you come from and who you come from, has the potential to create a more wholesome self, to add to the joy and happiness you may have. It has the potential to increase who you are, to increase a better understanding of our way of life that is a life of connections. Sometimes a lot of us that live outside of the culture and outside of the islands, we've lost that connection to people. We've lost that connection to place. And although we may be happy, although we may have all the things that we've ever wanted, you know, there can always be more. There can always be more ways that we can reach out and help relatives and countries come up. There's always ways we can reach out and help our environment, the oceans, the land, the animals, the creatures to come up as well. That's how we see ourselves. Pacific Islanders, it's never about me. You know, I'm happy, I don't speak the language, I don't live the culture, but I'm doing what I gotta do. That's awesome. But I would challenge you and say that there could be more if you were to include in that identity of yourself an identity that's connected and related to everything around you. That will increase your happiness. And so that's what I would say, that there's a potential to add more to it, a more complete sense of who you are. In a lot of instances, yes, it is a forgetting or it is an ignoring of basic values, basic tenets of our culture, and living in a way that's contrary to that. A lot of times, though, I recognize that many individuals, many groups have their own unique stories, their own unique experiences that may distance themselves from what could be called the norm or the nice families and ways of living, I guess. And so I wouldn't want to, downplay those experiences. But I can testify that when we have an identity grounded in those basic ideas of living a life connected to land, to events in history, when we live a life or we have an understanding that we are part of a whole, there's greater possibility for you to do more. I think you will be less likely to fall into the traps of living, in a world, a dog-eat-dog world, as they say. Less likely that you fall into those unfortunate pitfalls, gang affiliation, drugs, drug dependency, alcoholism, violence. When we see ourselves as a part of the Fonua, in Tongan we call it Fonua. Fonua is often translated as the land in dictionaries. But to the Tongan sense, Fonua is the land and the people. You cannot have one without the other. They're intimately, cosmogonically, originally connected. We come from the land. We are part of the land. And when Tongans refer to themselves, the natives, we call ourselves the Tangatai or Fefine Fonua, the people of the land, or the land's people, the land's person, the land's man, the land's woman, whatever. That type of worldview and outlook gives you a greater sense of responsibility. It also gives you a greater sense of empathy and being able to look at the world as not a world of chaos, but a world also of connectivity, connectedness. And so I would say, yes, if we want to help those who have been struggling in those specific areas, those ills that plague our society, one key aspect, one key to the work would be in addressing their connection to the land, to their ancestors, to their families, to the basic values and tenets of their culture. I think we do need to emphasize greatly how the learning of and the living of our culture. One of my mentors, a great influence on my life has always, his quote has always rung true with me, and he's Uncle Emil Wolfgram. He's a Tongan scholar. He was a professor at WCC down in Kaneohe, and he influenced me into thinking, you know, that in this world, this crazy world, you know, that we live in, and I don't remember exactly the quote, but the gist of the quote is that in order to, you know, to get by better in this crazy world, we need to be more Tongan. Tongans, you need to be more Tongan, you know, and so he meant it for everyone. Hawaiians, you need to be more Hawaiian. You need to focus not so much on the hardware, but on the software. You need to focus on the water, not so much the plumbing. Meaning that it is, again, that foundation of who we are can better inform you on where you gotta go, what you gotta do, who you have to surround yourself with, and whose lives do you need to be a part of. Like I said earlier, you know, a Tongan concept of whanua is so central, so key to our understanding of who we are, that it is found throughout our culture, throughout our, even throughout our islands. One way I think that could help, and how we can help people today through emphasizing learning their culture, is through whanua. And one way we articulate whanua is this, what I'm wearing here, my ta'avala. The ta'avala is a Tongan symbol for respect. All Tongans wear it as a way to show humility and respect for the people and the places that we are in, specifically towards our chiefs, yeah, and those of higher rank. But another symbol, another thing that the ta'avala represents is the whanua. When we put on our ta'avala, we are literally and symbolically taking upon ourselves the land and the people and wrapping ourselves in it. President Faivaola, President Shamwe, who's president of BYU before, had spoken on that in his documentaries, and that's what it is. That's the view of it in Tonga. This ta'avala, you know, when you learn about your culture and you realize what this means, that our duty, our responsibilities, our identities is very much connected to us being able to wrap ourselves in the people and the land. And then taking the kafa, the rope, and binding the land to ourselves. The rope representing our genealogies, our responsibilities, fatongia, our work, and the aspirations of our ancestors. When you use that as the kafa and you wrap the land to you tightly, you're able to go about and do the things that you need to do. And so I think, you know, when our kids and our even adults outside of the islands can realize that different things like that are part of our culture, were created to teach us on what our priorities should be, where our focus should be at, how we should live our lives, that these are actually tools that inform, instruct, guide, that the world will, you know, as corny as it may sound, the world will be a better place. You know, when people can understand, hey, I'm connected to you, you're connected to me, we're connected to this place, to create true harmony. There needs to be an acknowledgement and a realization that there is those connections and those relationships, and we need to bind those to ourselves. Before I finish, you know, I wanted to emphasize that the Tongan way of thinking and many of the Polynesian way of thinking is that the past is not something that's gone, long gone, behind us. We walk into the future. That's a very foreign concept to the Polynesian people. To us, the past is kimua, that comes before, or it stands before us. To Polynesian people, the past is something that we turn to for guidance. The past and our ancestors and the events before are always, it's cyclical. They're always occurring. Things that have occurred in the past have such great influence on today. People of the past, your ancestors, live on through you. And so we look to the past for guidance. We look to the past for lessons on how we can better navigate a future that's behind us that we don't know. We're in the present. We don't know what the future looks like, so we're not facing it. It's kimui, or behind. And so that's another great example I would offer, is that we realize that even our sense of time has been colonized and changed. Our sense of the time and ancestors and the past are cyclical and actually continuous. We are the results of our ancestors, but we're also the ancestors of those to come. You see? So it's continually, in that movement. And if we learn to look at it that way, I do truly believe that there would be a greater propensity, a greater movement by the young people, by all our people, in doing greater things, being better people, having a more harmonious whanua.